Well, hi everyone. Welcome to the Hard Answers. I'm Tom Graham. One person, one vote seems to be the common mantra whenever the people think a president got elected with fewer individual votes cast for him or her than for their opponent. The funny thing is, that never happens. History. Before the United States became united, they were states. In other words, they were countries. They were nations unto themselves, with their own laws, their own government, their own police force, their own armies, their own justice system. When the United States was founded, it had a hard time convincing states with small populations that it would be a good idea to give up some of their sovereignty to a central federal government. Why? Because they knew that they would have far less power than the states with large populations over federal issues that affect them directly, even though they were countries in and of themselves, with equal legal standing to any other country. Why give up equality for unity? So a compromise was struck. It was a compromise so awesome that it had 3 different names: the Connecticut Compromise, the Great Compromise of 1787, and the Sherman Compromise. This compromise provided that we have a bicameral Congress in which each state would have equal representation in the Senate, but proportional representation in the House. It's extremely important to realize that without this compromise, we would not have the United States. The United States would not exist without this compromise. So in creating the Electoral College for the presidential elections, the number of electors each state got in order to be fair to everyone was easy. The exact same number of representatives each state gets in Congress. But the Electoral College wasn't originally intended for the public to tell the electors how to vote. The electors were supposed to run independent of the presidential election, as people who could be trusted to make the best decision given the facts and then vote. Another reason was to keep the number of people actually voting for president down to a reasonable number to avoid a confrontational atmosphere. Hamilton wrote in the Federalist Papers, "It was desirable that the sense of the people should operate in the choice of the person to whom so important a trust was to be confided. This end will be answered by committing the right of making it, not to any pre-established body, but to men chosen by the people for the special purpose and at the particular conjuncture. It was equally desirable that the immediate election should be made by men most capable of analyzing the qualities adapted to the station, and acting under circumstances favorable to deliberation, and to a judicious combination of all the reasons and inducements which were proper to govern their choice." A small number of persons, selected by their fellow citizens from the general mass, will be most likely to possess the information and discernment requisite to such complicated investigations. It was also peculiarly desirable to afford as little opportunity as possible to tumult and disorder. In other words, Hamilton believed that the general public were a bunch of imbeciles, and that wise statesmen should be elected to disseminate the information available properly and cast the vote intelligently. But by the time the Constitution was agreed upon, the debate had turned over how the electors should be selected to states. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the Constitution states, "Each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct, a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in the Congress. But no senator or representative or person holding an office of trust or profit under the United States shall be appointed an elector. An elector that does not vote the way the public has instructed him or her to is known as a faithless elector. 21 states do not have laws compelling their electors to vote for a pledged candidate. 29 states plus the District of Columbia have laws to penalize faithless electors, although these have never been enforced. In lieu of penalizing a faithless elector, some states, such as Michigan and Minnesota, specify the faithless elector's vote is void. Minnesota invoked this law for the first time in 2016 when an elector pledged to Hillary Clinton attempted to vote for Bernie Sanders instead. In my home state of Michigan, presidential candidates submit a list of 16 qualified electors to the Secretary of State's office. The 16 electors whose candidate wins Michigan's popular vote will participate in the Electoral College at the state capitol in December. Most states distribute their Electoral College votes in the same winner-take-all fashion as Michigan. However, 2 states, Maine and Nebraska, apportion their electoral votes by congressional district. To be elected president, a candidate must receive at least 270 of the 538 electoral votes cast nationwide. If no candidate receives 270 votes, the final decision is made by the U.S. House of Representatives. Only 2 American presidents have ever been chosen by the U.S. House of Representatives because they lacked enough electoral college votes. In 1800, Thomas Jefferson, and in 1824, John Quincy Adams both took office after the election was sent to the House of Representatives. However, there is a little-known loophole in the Constitution. If no candidate receives 270 votes, the Senate first votes for the President of the Senate from the 3 VP candidates with the most electoral votes. The House, who the Constitution allows to make its own rules, can then choose to table the vote for President for the full term of the president, thus making the VP acting president for the entire term. To counter the politically volatile environment of the late 18th century, the Electoral College was established to balance the state's and the people's interests. The idea of mass communication and the dominant 2-party political system we take for granted today was not anticipated by our country's first leaders as they wrestled with the problems of our early republic. Our country was founded on the principle of government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Voting is one of the country's most cherished rights. Our political system, including the Electoral College, is designed to ensure the full realization of this fundamental principle. Science. While politicians and pundits debate the merits of the Electoral College, mathematicians have made a surprising discovery. Dividing a national election into many separate state elections actually increases the power of each citizen's vote. As an individual voter, you, in the long run, have more influence on the outcome of presidential elections under the Electoral College system than you would in direct national elections. How much more depends on the number of states, their populations, and how the electoral votes are distributed. But in every single case, in every state, the Electoral College increases each voter's influence. The website ScienceBuzz has created an individual voter influence calculator for you to play with. You can find the link to it in the description section below. Statistics. Arguments against the Electoral College are typically anti-federalism and anti-states' rights. They typically argue that the Electoral College creates swing states that garner the attention of the candidates, and the rest of the states are ignored as far as campaigning goes. But in today's world of the internet communications and live streaming, this is a fairly pathetic argument. Whenever a presidential candidate makes any speech anywhere in the world, it is watched by everyone in the country. Society. One person, one vote seems to be a common mantra whenever a president gets elected, with fewer individual votes cast for him or her than for the opponent. The problem is that never happens. As I've discussed, when you are voting in your state, you are directly voting for your state's electors, only indirectly for the president. So it's far more accurate to say that the combined electors of the candidate that lost got more individual votes than the combined electors of the candidate that won. But every individual elector got more votes than the opposition in their district. When you say it correctly, it really doesn't have the same zing, does it? Law. This one-person, one-vote concept has manifested itself into a state compact project that thankfully seems to be dead in the water. The National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. This compact does not eliminate the Electoral College, but does eliminate fairness from the presidential election, shifting the power gained in the original Great Compromise from small states back to larger states, and eliminates the supreme congressional power to resolve election disputes without a constitutional amendment. These two reasons probably make the compact unconstitutional, or at the very least requires it to be approved by Congress before activated. My opinion. With technological advances in voting, counting votes, and poll security, many of the Founding Fathers' concerns have already been taken care of procedurally, eliminating the need to appoint electors. I don't agree with Hamilton that the general public are a bunch of morons incapable of voting for a president. Many state legislatures have adopted winner-take-all laws for their electors, and some have adopted laws that make electors' votes not count if they vote contrary to how they have been told to vote. The Electoral College mimics the bicameral Congress and ensures the needed fairness between lower population states and larger population states that the original Great Compromise guaranteed. In the United States, states and the federal government operate within a system of parallel sovereignty, which recognizes that the states are nations unto themselves, which created the federal government, not the other way around. If getting rid of the Electoral College makes sense, then getting rid of the Senate also makes sense. And getting rid of state governors and state legislatures also makes sense. And getting rid of the 10th Amendment also makes sense, because we're all one big happy nation. States are simply subdivisions of the nation, and we should all be operating under the same set of rules created by the federal government. If it makes sense to get rid of the Electoral College, then if a state has a problem with slavery, abortion, or immigration law, that's just too bad, because we're a nation, and the federal laws are supreme. One of the big reasons low population states join the U.S. is the fairness being endangered by the National Popular Vote Compact. Getting rid of the Electoral College or circumventing it using the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact is removing a foundational reason for those states to remain in the United States. Many smaller states may want to secede bilaterally at first, which the Supreme Court says is possible, but when the U.S. denies their application to secede, they may feel strong enough to band together and secede unilaterally. And that may lead to another civil war. Considering there are nuclear weapons in almost every state, does it really matter at that point who's on the right side of history, or for that matter, whether or not the Supreme Court says states don't have the right to secede unilaterally? Please click the subscribe button to see more videos like this. If you disagree with me, please leave a comment. My ears are always open, and I learn new things every day when people disagree with me. I'm Tom Graham. I'll see you next time on The Hard Answers.